Hello loyal subscribers. This time I'd like to do something different. Instead of the usual release of incorrectly summarized ship guides and overly edited gameplay trailers, this one will be about playing submarines, how they work, and most importantly how to deal with them. I'm making this video simply to share knowledge about subs to people who still care about the game, and I think I'm qualified enough to do that. As you can see, I'm also part of the problem, and here is my badge to top it all off. But I do this so people can better understand the class instead of constantly complaining about it. All the things I said will be my own findings or opinion, and I will not address any submarine related politics. Those are my premise. And now for the actual video. Here are the things I will be covering. Timestamps are below, so you can look up the part you want to watch, but I suggest watching the whole thing so you can better understand the context. Go grab something to keep you busy, as this will be a long one. Maybe take some breaks after some segments. With all of that said, we can now begin. One of the easier way to familiarize with submarines is to treat them like your typical torpedo destroyers. They are stealthy, likes to abuse flanks, rarely use their guns, and incredibly annoying when you know it's there. The only major difference is that submarine can break stealth at any moment and can ambush from anywhere. Yet despite the seemingly overpowered ability, they are not as influential as people think, requiring a lot more layers of Swiss cheese for success, because the moment a submarine made the smallest mistake and meeting a half-decent player, its options become severely limited. Trust me on this, and you will soon find out that submarines were just as insignificant as another torpedo destroyer if you know what to do. And conversely, you can be a decent submarine player by knowing all the Swiss cheese layers that lies ahead. There are 4 depth settings for submarines in this game. First is the surface. A submarine on the surface works just like a normal destroyer. This is where you spot enemy ships and replenish its dive capacity, pretty much where a submarine should be located if it wants to make an impact to the game. The next one is periscope depth. This is where a submarine breaks spotting from nearby enemies, or to sneak around and get into a favorable position with a much better concealment. But do remember that it uses dive capacity and can still be spotted. Third one is being fully underwater. This is mainly used to completely break spotting from ships that wanted to focus the submarine, but it will have limited maneuverability, which means it also has limited range. And on maximum depth, it's mainly used for fighting against other submarines and a way to slightly increase dive capacity, which you will see later. These depth difference should make logical sense even for those unfamiliar with submarines. Don't worry, I will fill the missing details in another part of the video. Driving a submarine underwater is pretty straightforward. You press F key to go up and C key to go down. This works just like the engine telegraph. The submarine will work its way to the desired depth. How fast it's able to reach said depth will vary between submarines, along with their respective builds, skills, and consumables. The only constant to remember is that no matter how fast the submarine is going, it will always have the same ascending and descending rate, probably to simplify things. They will also bleed speed when transitioning between depths, then return to the maximum speed possible at the new depth, although it won't drop by a significant amount. Keep this in mind when you need to avoid damage, as it could be the difference between taking damage and getting away unharmed, because taking the smallest damage in submarines can be punishing, if not properly managed. And lastly, remember that undersea topography exists that gets shallower the closer you are to an island, so pay attention to the depth gauge when submerging, and look for this icon, so you don't foolishly beach the ship on the seafloor. Dive capacity or battery is how much time available for a submarine to remain underwater. It depletes when the submarine is at periscope depth or lower, and recharges when the submarine is back on the surface. It uses units as its units, but shown as a timer on the heads-up display. I'm not sure why they can't stick with either, but you'll get used to it. The dive capacity is also visible for everyone if the submarine is spotted, so people can gauge how long the submarine can stay underwater. Currently, all submarines have the same depletion rate, and there is only one consumable able to manipulate that. However, the recharge rate is varied between nations. The best one is found on the I-56 at 2 units per second or 2 seconds per second. I guess that's why they use 2 units. This recharge rate can be affected by upgrade and captain skills. More on those later. There is one way to extend overall dive capacity, which is to go to the maximum depth with a depleted battery and get somewhere between 30 to 40 seconds of being underwater while the submarine is preparing itself to surface, which is useful if you need to escape. Submarines have completely different set of consumables compared to others. 2 of them have their own separate segment in the video, as they are something normal ships player must understand as well. The other 3 is rather straightforward and can be explained right now. First is enhanced rudder, which functions to increase dive and ascending speed, only found on American submarines. Then there's the reserve battery unit consumable, that basically freezes the dive capacity during the consumable's duration, and only found on select submarines to artificially extend their dive capacity. The most familiar consumable is the limited DCP, which lasts longer than most destroyers, except for German submarines, but has longer cooldown and limited number of use, so damage control management is particularly important when playing submarines. Now we get to a spicy one, hydrophone. Also known as radar, that works more like actual radar in real life than existing radar in the game. The way it works is highlighting surface ships within its range, shown as pulsing white circles plus noisy black silhouette for a brief moment, and putting them on the mini-map for your team to notice as well. This is updated every 6 seconds until the action time runs out. While it doesn't spot ships directly, this is a powerful consumable, because currently there is no way for the enemy to know if they were detected by hydrophone. A completely one-sided interaction. Different nation has their own hydrophone flavor, so make sure to double check. To use it, you must be at periscope depth or deeper, as it won't work if you are on the surface. Then activate the consumable if you want to find an unspotted ship nearby. Keep in mind that it will only highlight surface ship and submarines on periscope depth. It cannot highlight a submerged submarine. Those are reserved for submarine surveillance in the next segment. Perhaps one of the best use of hydrophone is lining up a shotgun from underwater without raising any red flag for the enemy, and while also avoiding their hydroacoustic surge that works in conjunction with a certain skill. Remember this thing, so the next time you fell victim to a shotgun, 9 out of 10 times is because the submarine has the superior intel. As the name suggests, this consumable is for detecting submarines. The way it works is physically detecting a submerged submarine within its search range and make it visible for a whole minute to everyone. However, it will not detect a submarine that is on the surface. A key thing to remember, if you want to engage it, this is the consumable to use to take down other submarine, usually against those who overextend, giving you and the team a real chance at killing it. This consumable is available on all submarines except for the I-56, and has a long preparation time, most likely to prevent 2 submarines killing each other early in the game. Good intuition is needed to use this consumable, as just like radar and hydrophone, it can provide a completely one-sided result, but exclusively against submarines. Since submarines are physically small and hard to hit, the game implemented a splash damage mechanic exclusively to them. They have an imaginary hitbox around the ship. If a shell landed within said hitbox, it will damage the submarine, but with reduced damage. For HE and SAP shells, it's roughly half the normal penetration damage. For example, a 120mm HE shell with 1750 alpha has 578 penetration damage, but a splash damage to a submarine will only do 289 damage. The same math applies to SAP, but because SAP has a much bigger alpha than HE, it's much more effective at killing submarines. Although remember that low caliber SAP can still bounce. However, for AP shells, it will only do over pen damage, which are mostly lower than HE or SAP, making it the worst shell to use against submarines. There is one interesting quirk on splash damage. While submarines have damage saturation just like other ships, it does not affect the damage taken from splash damage. So if a submarine is physically saturated already, it will die faster from splash damage instead of a direct hit. Once a submarine got down to periscope depth, it's gonna be splash damage only, and when fully submerged it can no longer be damaged by shells. Now we move on to other armaments. First up, rockets and bombs. Long story short, with exception of a direct hit, it will not damage a submarine, pretty much ignored by the splash damage hitbox. So a submarine can stay in periscope depth and be invulnerable to carrier attack. However, not all bombs are created equal. Such example would be bombs from Dutch airstrike. Not only it has ridiculous alpha, it also does splash damage, basically allowing them to clap a submarine that didn't pay attention. And of course we all know about aerial depth charge bombs. They have a bigger blast radius than normal shells, and able to do a direct hit, dealing full damage, and half damage if it splashes. At its furthest distance it will only deal incapacitations, like breaking modules and causing floodings. By the way, going deeper does not protect a submarine from any kind of depth charge, including ship drop depth charge. It will damage it the same way as if it was on the surface, but this is for gameplay purposes. All these ways to damage a submarine have something in common. It will almost always cause the submarine to leak its fuel, giving away its position. More on this in the next segment. But what about torpedoes? Like a destroyer, they can be hit with conventional torpedoes, but they cannot be damaged by any deep water ones, despite able to physically go underwater. Again, this is not my decision to make, so please consult the balancing department. However, you can still hit a submarine superstructure when it's at periscope depth with conventional torpedoes, although you'll probably wasted all your luck for this to happen. Anytime a submarine receives any kind of damage, it will cause a fuel leak. This icon will appear on the bottom along with this text, which indicates that a fuel leak is imminent. Then followed by a second icon and text that indicates the actual fuel leak, plus a visual showing them leaking from the submarine. It does no damage over time and lasted 40 seconds, but it's a big deal because it left a big black splotch on the water visible for everyone. This splotch of fuel spawns every few seconds on top of the submarine to reveal its position, and overlaps with the previous one. The gap between splotches and where they spawn is the most absolute way to find where the submarine is going and predict where to drop depth charges. To fix this fuel leak, a submarine must use its damage control and lose a charge, or go to the surface and risk being spotted by the enemy. Two very critical tactical choice which I will cover in the damage control user segment. Now for the part we've all been waiting for, the reasons why submarines are hated by everyone. Let's start with sonar. It takes the first armament slot. The way it works is it shoots a pulse towards an enemy ship, often referred as a ping. When this ping contacts the hull of an enemy ship, it flags that hull section to be intercepted by homing torpedoes, highlighted as light yellow color. A pinged hull section will stay active for 25 seconds, and homing torpedoes will actively seek that hull section, taking enemy ship speed and heading into account as well, and shown with this green homing lines, all within the ping duration, until the torpedo is out of range, or until it's within homing torpedo's cut-off distance. Torpedo cut-off distance is the distance at which homing torpedo stops homing at a ship. This distance is different for each ship type, submarine tier, and even down to sub-specific values, with battleships having the furthest distance, and fellow submarines having the shortest. When the green homing lines is no longer visible, you know that the torpedo has reached that cut-off distance and would no longer track the pinged section. You can also manually disable concurrent homing by pressing G on the keyboard, which will also remove the ping. Now back to that cut-off distance value. Notice the second value on the right column. This is applied when the ship is double pinged, where the same hull section is pinged twice, highlighted with a bright yellow color, and lasted for a whole minute. This time not only the cut-off distance becomes shorter, it also makes the homing torpedo's turns better. While it is not clear how much better it homes with a double ping, it can be observed turning a lot stronger, and I calculate that using the in-game compass. So what about the homing torpedoes themselves? They are characterized by having very high speed, low damage, and have higher detectability than normal torpedoes. And it appears that slower homing torpedoes have better turning capabilities, at least judging from this clip of the slowest homing torpedoes in the game so far. I mean, logically it would make sense, but I have no hard data on what is essentially homing torpedoes turning circle. They can still be fired normally without a sonar ping, just like normal torpedoes. Very useful against clueless enemies. And can also be fired from underwater. However, it needs an active ping to hit surface ships, otherwise it will just pass through underneath the ship. This brings us nicely to sonar and homing torpedoes behavior from underwater. When fully submerged, you can aim sonar at any direction, and it will travel in a straight line. But once it hits the surface, it will only travel for a short distance before disappearing. So to ping a ship from underwater, the submarine must ping directly at the hull, or within proximity of it. The homing torpedoes will then raise to the surface and do their things, such as hitting ships that doesn't have plane depth charges. The same can be done against submerged submarine as well. This time the torpedoes will basically fly underwater, although aiming the sonar in 3 dimension will take some practice. One thing is for certain, anytime a submarine uses a ping, it will spawn this crescent on the surface that indicates their location. But unlike fuel leak, it works in a more special way, and it will be explained in the depth charge usage segment. In addition to homing torpedoes, submarines have conventional torpedoes like those found on normal ships, available from Tier 8, except for British submarines. They can be selected by double pressing the third armament option, and it takes a brief moment to switch. These conventional torpedoes are characterized by having slower speed than homing torpedoes, have a much higher alpha, and are just ever so slightly more stealthy. But they have a much longer arming distance compared to homing torpedoes, and cannot be launched from underwater. Something to remember if you want to torpedo an enemy ship from point blank range, famously known as shotgunning, which is the main purpose of these torpedoes. Keep in mind that most submarines, except for a select few, has something called torpedo dispersion, which means they would not come out straight from the torpedo tubes, just like a wet spaghetti. This was a measure to reduce the effectiveness of shotgunning, but I don't think it changes anything. More about this in the shotgunning segment. Compared to other class, submarines have the least amount of captain skills. Some of them functions the same way as existing skills. Some of them have improved effect. And of course there are submarine specific skills. To save time, I will only go through the most notable one. This is Watchful, and it is perhaps one of the most powerful skill available for a submarine. It works by showing the player if there is a ship detecting consumable active within the vicinity, such as radar, hydro, and submarine surveillance. For example, this submarine is at periscope depth, spotting this radar ship. When that radar ship uses its radar, the submarine will be notified that a spotting consumable is currently within range, so it's probably a bad idea to surface. Another example, this submarine is approaching this cruiser. With Watchful, the submarine can go underwater and check if that cruiser has its hydro active without getting spotted. It can then decide to go balls deep and shotgun, or turn away. As you can see, with a bit of intuition, a submarine can avoid getting spotted by taking this skill, and just like Hydrophone, it's very much a one-sided interaction. Another skills worth looking is improved battery efficiency and enlarged propeller shaft. Both are activated when the dive capacity is below 50%. The former provides increased battery recharge when the submarine is on the surface, and the latter increases the submarine speed. This is what allows a submarine to reach upwards of 40 knots. I'm not gonna go through the rest of the skills since they are either mandatory or self-explanatory, and this video is approaching 20 minutes already. Submarines gets their own assortment of upgrades, with choices between improving sonar, improving torpedo, improving battery, or improving maneuverability. Again, they are self-explanatory and made to fit players' preference. The main difference to other ships is the absence of concealment upgrade. I mean, it's pretty redundant for submarines, well, except for the I-56. Builds for submarines along with the skills will be covered in Submarine Builds segment. Most submarines you'll encounter will either be German or American, and occasionally the British. Here are their differences and flavors. The Germans will be a popular one. They are the most stealthy, have the most dive capacity, and the longest homing torpedo range. They are without a doubt the most forgivable to play. Recommended for new players that wanted to try submarine. American subs are more complex. They trade dive capacity and stealth for flexibility by having rear torpedo launchers and slightly better sonar characteristic. They are best for experienced players who want a more dynamic gameplay such as myself. And for British submarines, they are essentially made for people who wants to play German submarines, but does not want to play a German ship, while losing the normal torpedoes and being less stealthy. Despite these distinctions between nations, and ignoring the nuances, I think all of them can be played in a similar way, and at the end of the day, it's only a matter of which nation is the most comfortable to play for individual player. Now, it is time to dive deeper and find out how to play them properly. So you wanna know how to play submarines? That is a wise choice. But there are some points to keep in mind. 1. There is no such thing as instant gratification when playing submarines. Some thought process is needed to increase the chance of landing torpedo hits. And believe me, it's not as easy as spamming double ping to an enemy ship and hope for the best. 2. Is to know your enemy. Build up knowledge of what enemy ship you will be facing. What is their depth charge armament? What is the range of their plane depth charge? Do they have hydro? And last but not least, is how good they are at the game. From my observation, it's easier to identify a good or a bad player simply by how they deal with submarines. This is something you must able to observe. And finally, the third point is to lower your expectations. Lower it down to periscope depth. This class could be both near unstoppable or immediately die when it gets spotted, even if you play it properly, as being lucky is still a deciding factor on most games. To reiterate, playing submarine is about being vigilant, observant, and grounded with pragmatism. Before you start the game, you must know the impact of being spotted. Let's say you were approaching a battleship, but got spotted by a destroyer. When that happened, you can submerge to periscope depth to break vision and avoid damage from that destroyer, because he has no way to damage the submarine directly. But that brief spotting may allow that enemy battleship to drop their depth charge on your submarine, and now it knows your intention. If this happened, it means you have overextended and forgot about enemy destroyer that were more capable at spotting a submarine. If you don't want this to happen, you must be absolutely sure on the whereabouts of enemy destroyer by using that hydrophone to check your surroundings. But rather than betting on enemy destroyers ignoring you, which they probably won't anyway, it is always tactically better to deal with them first. You go to periscope depth. By using hydrophones, you make an intercept course for the destroyer. Eventually you will spot said destroyer without getting spotted in return, simply because most destroyers have a worse air detection than submarines. Then do your best at matching its heading. Maybe use sonar and launch some homing torpedoes to get its attention. It will then retreat or approach you. Either way, he will be exposed long enough to be killed by your teammates. For this encounter you just watched, I will rate myself a B- for failing to retreat and being too close to enemy fleet. If the enemy fleet is sufficiently far away and you know the destroyer is retreating, you can surface to spot it, throw sonar and homing torpedoes at its direction, and submerge again to break vision. If you're lucky, you may score a torpedo hit or two. I will rate this encounter as an S, which stands for sucks to be you. And finally, if you have teammates nearby, you can surface to bait an enemy destroyer into shooting you. Then you submerge and repeat the process. This will keep it spotted and make it an easy kill for your teammates. I will rate this encounter as C for being a I think I made the point clear enough. If you give enemy destroyers a hard time, you'll have an easier game. I hate repeating how important this is at winning anything, but this is really the only choice considering how close a submarine is to a destroyer. Like seriously, even at point blank range, the best way to deal with an enemy destroyer is to let them come while you retreat. The same tactic used by literally every cruiser in the game. That being said, this is the ideal kind of playstyle. You can't do this if the enemy destroyer is competent and have reliable backup. at which point it's better to play it safe until opportunity arises. When enemy destroyer is no longer a problem, you can either spot the enemy or hunt enemy submarine. Preferably you do the former, as it is more beneficial for the team, but if you know that a submarine is within spotting range, then you can hunt more in Submarines versus Submarine segment. Spotting the enemy is preferred not because it's beneficial for the team, but because it's also massively rewarding. All you do is spot and get the Combat Scout ribbon, which will guarantee 2000 base EXP if you win the game, and much more if you cap the objectives, to a point where landing torpedoes is pretty much a bonus. Here's the thing about submarines. Most failures happened because the player are impatient, becoming too focused on landing a torpedo hit, and since submarines shoots torpedoes from the bow, naturally they will be endlessly chasing their target. Please stop doing this. The secret to be a good submarine player is to maintain safe distance, not only from depth charge airstrike, but also from islands. You must take extra caution when coming around islands because a lack of spotting may give a nasty surprise. If you need to go around island, you want to be at periscope depth, but really you should avoid doing this entirely. Staying in open water gives room to maneuver while you track enemy movement. You can start attacking when they push. This is because it's a lot easier to land homing torpedoes against people that are pushing, and I will guide you how to do it in the next segment. So to summarize, use hydrophone and concealment to spot an enemy destroyer, then use torpedoes and utilize your teammates to get it killed. After that go spot enemy ships from open water, and avoid islands if necessary. If you wanna do a torpedo run, do it only when the enemy is pushing, and remember, a submarine is magnitude more useful if it's on the surface. Now that you know how to play like a pro, let's talk about landing those torpedoes. Here is how to properly use homing torpedoes. First, you must find an enemy ship that are predictable, such as stationary ship, island camping ships, ships that kept sailing in a straight line, and ships that are distracted. Then you launch the torpedoes following the gray indicator line. And now comes the important part. You must not use that sonar until the torpedoes is within 4 kilometers of enemy ship. Sonaring takes time to arrive, so take that into account as well. Basically, you want the enemy to have the least amount of reaction time. This is a recurring theme at landing torpedoes. It's all about the surprise factor and not giving the enemy any hints that they were being hunted. One ping in the correct time is often all you need. But of course, in most games, it wouldn't be this easy. Ships change their course regularly. Homing torpedoes have terrible detection and cut-off distance. The usage of sonar also gives immediate heads up. This means decent players still have a chance to respond. You can compensate that by giving them less options to dodge. To make things easier, I will provide some animations. Let's say there's an enemy ship pushing your position at an angle. Normally if you throw all torpedoes at once and then use your sonar, it will take notice and turn into the torpedoes to dodge all of them. This is because all of your torpedoes comes at the same angle and at the same time. What you want to do instead is to split the torpedoes into multiple angles. This way the torpedoes will home at the enemy ship from multiple directions, and some of them will have a bigger impact angle. Another way to do it is to stagger the torpedoes. This way the enemy ship may able to dodge the first torpedo, but by maneuvering, it loses speed and momentum, which means it becomes more susceptible to be hit by the following torpedoes. Fun fact, I discovered this from co-op bots. Here you see I'm launching torpedoes at random direction and stagger them. The target is this French ship, since it's pushing. After a short while I used my sonar and got it pinged. Then it used its damage control. This is perfect damage control timing to negate those torpedoes. But it made a mistake, which is failing to retreat immediately. This allows my second sonar and torpedo salvo to catch it mid-turning. And now it's basically dead. This happened because of good timing, good sonar, and the staggered launch. First I managed to ping its front section. This means the torpedoes leads further forward and can actually catch up with the ship. Had I pinged somewhere in the middle or further back, the torpedoes wouldn't lead as much and probably missed it. Combined with the enemy ship being late at turning and staggered torpedo contributes to this successful torpedo run. But do not worry, I will give guides on how to properly dodge them. Another equally important thing to do while using sonar and homing torpedoes is to keep moving. This is mainly to avoid airstrike depth charge since your sonar ping will be visible for the enemy. My favorite way to do it is sailing perpendicular, while alternating between the bow and stern launcher. This is why salmon is one of my favorite submarines. Before we conclude this segment, a short statement regarding damage control baiting. This is where you throw sonar ping and hope the enemy will clear it so you can ping it again. Here is my take. This is a waste of time. It's just a faster way to let the enemy know you are nearby and simply gives them more opportunity to retreat. Although there is an argument to be made that it will be using its damage control anyway. Ultimately, the art of torpedo bending is something that can only be mastered through practice. So, if you want to get those homing torpedoes to hit, start by finding easy and predictable ships, then learn to use sonar sparingly and efficiently. Once you're comfortable with it, you can start launching torpedoes like co-op bots and go after more mobile ships, reading their movement and improving your timing. Remember, if the torpedo sees more broadside, the higher the chance of hitting. Shotgunning, for the lack of a better term, is shooting torpedoes to enemy ship from point blank range, as in within 3 kilometers or less, with the goal of killing said enemy ship as quickly and as painlessly as possible, using normal torpedoes for better damage. Pulling this off may look like the most straightforward attack when using a submarine. You find an enemy ship, preferably something big and slow. You approach it from periscope depth. You throw torpedoes in front of it and tell it to uninstall the game. But if it were this easy, why isn't everyone doing it? Because in practice, this is a very risky thing to pull. Remember the almighty layers of cheese. First, you must not get spotted on your way to the ship you want to shotgun. This means the enemy submarine must not be nearby. You must not be detected by radio location skill. And of course you cannot use any torpedoes along the way. Then you have to go to periscope to stay undetected, still hoping your target is blissfully unaware of your presence. It better not have hydro as well. And after all of that, you must be absolutely sure not to f it up, as at this moment everyone will know where you are, and you have already spent half if not most of your dive capacity. The ideal angle to shotgun is unsurprisingly the broadside. This allows the torpedoes to hit unsaturated part of the ship to deal the highest potential damage and giving it less chance at dodging. Once you're able to shotgun consistently, you can try to shotgun cruisers and destroyers. They are much harder to hit, but they will take less torpedoes to kill. Sometimes even homing torpedoes will be better, as they are faster. If shotgunning is your cup of tea, both of these submarines are made exactly for this purpose, and both of them have no torpedo dispersion, all at the expense of short-range homing torpedo. Still, all things considered, shotgunning often works in an opportunistic way, and you might just fall into a situation where shotgunning is the only option. That being said, it is worth knowing that shotgunning is often viewed as a manlier way to kill a ship. As explained from like half an hour ago, submarines have limited number of DCP and must be used in a discreet way. Yet at the same time, submarine have a lot more things to worry about. We have seen how a simple fuel leak can kill a submarine, how depth charge splashes will guarantee flooding, how direct hit will break everything, and then you still have to deal with potential sonar ping from enemy submarine. To wisely use DCP, you must consider everything when the submarine receives a hit. If the submarine is leaking fuel, do your best to get out of enemy range, so you can surface and fix the leak. But if surfacing is not an option, you can use the DCP, but you still have to get out of enemy range afterwards. This is because submarine DCP has a long cooldown, so you want to create a breathing room after using it. Essentially, you want to use DCP, either to escape a sticky situation, or when the fight has already ended. The only exception is when you were fighting against enemy submarine, and it's coming up in the next segment. However, the best way to use DCP on a submarine is to not use it at all. Having limited number of charges and long cooldown does not allow reckless play. This is unless you are confident enough to trade one of those charge with an enemy ship. Now we reached one of the most exciting segments, watching two submarines fighting each other. It must be very engaging, but in reality, this is something neither submarine player really want to do, but still necessary to win games. This fighting often starts when a submarine uses its submarine surveillance, which is only possible after like 4 minutes into the game. You have two ways to deal with it. First is to be reactive. This means waiting for the enemy submarine to use their submarine surveillance against you. And secondly is to be proactive, which is basically the opposite. Although you will most likely encounter the first one. If you play properly, start by putting your submarine on the surface. This is to make sure the coast is clear from other enemy ship that could attack you. And most importantly, to not be spotted by submarine surveillance from enemy submarine. When watchful skill tells you that a submarine surveillance is active, you wait until it's no longer active. Then you can use yours to hunt it back. If you're doing it proactively, make sure there are visible hints that enemy submarine is clearly nearby and underwater. Once you are underwater, you use sonar to ping enemy submarine. Then you launch half of your front torpedoes. This is to anticipate the enemy using its DCP. If it does, you wait until you can ping it again. Then you launch the remaining front torpedoes. As you can see, this is why you want to avoid being spotted and get pinged by enemy submarine when you are underwater, because homing torpedoes against submarines are the hardest to dodge, having the shortest cutoff distance, and compounded by submarines having worse maneuverability underwater. It is still possible to dodge torpedoes underwater without using DCP. One way to do it is to change the depth and timing it perfectly so that the torpedoes only track the start of the ascent. This is because ascending and descending speed is not linear, but are eased out when it's close to target depth. I hope this animation will help you understand how it works. Still, this is a very difficult thing to pull. It is best to use DCP and then surface the submarine to break contact, but really you are better off not caught in this situation. One of my favorite stunt against submarines is underwater shotgunning, where you torpedo enemy submarine without using sonar. To do this, you must be at the same depth as enemy submarine. This is indicated by the game highlighting it with a bright red color. You can then simply follow the gray line. Shoot the torpedoes without the enemy submarine expecting it, then get one of the most normal accusation ever seen in this game. To summarize, you want to prevent being detected by submarine surveillance by staying on the surface while looking at hints of enemy submarines in the vicinity. If watchful notifies you of active submarine surveillance, you wait it out. Then you can strike back with yours when it's no longer active. Use your sonar and half torpedo salvo against enemy submarine to force it to use DCP. Then do it again to finish it. Conversely, save yours for potential sonar ping and break contact by surfacing. Don't forget to always maintain distance from other enemy ships. Admittedly, there isn't much variety to submarine builds, with exception of some premium submarines. Most of them play the same way. I will go through the skills based on priority, and this time I will not forget to mention Adrenaline Rush. Liquidator is pretty much a no-brainer, and so were preventative maintenance. But for the third skill, Watchful should take priority, and I want every submarine to have this skill from this point on. Then for the fourth skill, I would suggest improved battery efficiency, which will synergize well with a certain upgrade. After this, grind another 3 points, and get Consumables Specialist, as it provides a massive improvement for literally all the consumables. Then you want to grind another 3 points for Superintendent, so you can have 33% more DCP. And finally you want to grind 4 points for Adrenaline Rush, simply to please everyone. The alternative build is to replace Adrenaline Rush with Enhanced Propeller Shaft, if you value mobility. Now you might be asking, why I didn't take sonar skills. Truthfully, they are simply not worth taking, as you can use sonar perfectly fine without them. I prefer the added flexibility, ease of use, and overall benefits provided by the skills I've chosen. For the upgrades, I would go for Main Armaments Mod 1, but you can use Damage Control Party Mod 1 as well. For the second slot, take Engine Room Protection. For the third slot, you will have a hard choice between Torpedo Tubes Mod 1 or Dive Capacity Mod 1. You can't go wrong with either, but I personally take the latter, as it works with improved battery efficiency skill to improve dive capacity recharge rate. For the fourth slot, it's again a choice between Propulsion Mod 1 and Submarine Steering Gears Mod 2, but since submarines aren't exactly the best at avoiding shots, I would take the latter. for the 5th slot, Submarine Steering Gears Mod 3 is a no-brainer. And finally for the 6th slot is to take Dive Capacity Mod 2, simply because it has no negatives, and submarines already have a relatively fast torpedo reload. Finally we get to signals. Take Juliet Whiskey for flooding chance, November Foxtrot, Sierra Mike, and last but not least, Hotel Yankee, which is useful when all else fails. This concludes our submarine gameplay segment. Now let's see how to play against them. I best hope you didn't just skip to this segment. Anyway, straight to the point. You deal with submarines by also keeping your distance, always in motion, and never be predictable. Make yourself an incredibly difficult target for enemy submarine. For destroyers, whenever you got spotted by submarines on periscope depth, as seen on the Playstyle segment, you want to immediately turn away and break spotting. Not because a submarine may able to shotgun your ship, but because you will be shot by all of its friends. Ironically, hunting submarines is the last thing you want to do when playing destroyers, because it will always put you out of position. For battleships, you will be the main target for most submarines, but paradoxically they are the best submarine counter. Battleship depth charges are the best anti-submarine armament in the game, able to remove half of submarine HP with 2 direct hits, and have the longest range. They are the one that does the actual damage to submarines, and the best way to do it is unsurprisingly by retreating. This would not only give some distance to dodge torpedoes, but also to force enemy submarine to push and get caught by the rest of your team while you drop depth charges from safety. Basically you become the bait that gives false hope to submarines that lacks spatial awareness. And finally for cruisers, they are somewhere in between a destroyer and a battleship when it comes to dealing with submarines. They can equip hydro, are more maneuverable, and some of the big ones have airstrike depth charges as well. So submarines will be less likely to focus you. That is unless you were camping island and refusing to move the ship, or were overextending to a point of no return. As for CVs, well, just run away in a zigzag pattern and let your automatic airstrike depth charge do the killing. To sum it all up, destroyers are best at spotting submarines, at least for a brief moment. Cruisers are for submarine deterrent, so they don't get too aggressive, and battleships would be the one that does the killing, while also being the bait. Know your general role against submarines, and they will become less of a problem. All of these classes shares a common theme. Anytime a submarine decides to focus, the first thing to do is to get moving. Taking a sonar ping is one of the best way to know that you were not in a good position. Fortunately, this type of responses are in line with the usual response against, well, pretty much any other ship. The only difference is that you may not spot the ship in question, and I believe this is where most of the complaints came from. Even if you don't manage to kill it, at the very least, make the enemy submarine go through an infuriating experience. Make them think twice the next time they went after you. But of course, there will be scenarios where you have to do something to the submarines, such as this instance of a destroyer shooting my submarine when it had the chance, and not getting spotted because my teammates aren't nearby. If you are capable on reading these kind of situations, then more power to you. This guidelines is for those who are not familiar with what to do against submarines just yet, but always remember that a submarine can also do the same thing to you. Playing decent is only half the battle, the other half is hoping your teammates are in the same battle. I have to be honest, if your ship uses ship launch depth charges, you have all the rights to complain about submarines, simply because they do not work in this game. At best, they function to kill submarines that horribly overextends, while at any other time they exist so people can roleplay as Tom Hanks from that Torpedo Beat movie. But if your ship is among the lucky ones equipped with airstrike depth charges, you have no excuse. This is the best new armament that cannot damage surface ships at all. They can be accessed in an instant, does not require traversing, and all you need to do is to have good prediction on where enemy submarine will be based on arrival time, which can be shorter the closer you launch them. Good for submarines that got too close, and once again it made ship launch depth charges redundant. Hell, you can even throw them in a general direction and get a lucky hit to a completely unspotted submarine. They even have secondary functions. First is to look for an unspotted enemy ship, because these counts as plane squadron. Enemy ship that doesn't turn off their ray will shoot them, and now you can see the general location of that enemy ship. And secondly is to bait enemy fighters out of their patrol zone. Pretty useful to minimize their spotting against yourself and friendly ships. However, these airstrike depth charges are carried by planes and are subject to AA damage. You can use this to your advantage to protect friendly submarines if they are close enough to your ship, and as a submarine you must also know about this if you want to avoid damage. That being said, because it's free to use and can be spammed however you like, the submarine gets its own gimmick to defend itself. Basically, if a submarine uses its sonar and were not spotted, the location of the sonar crescent will be random and does not represent the actual location of the submarine. Sometimes it can be so far away from the actual location, but from what I've seen, this randomness is only within vertical axis relative to the submarine, so it isn't all that bad. Still, it is not a reliable indicator of a submarine's actual location. A good submarine player will always be unpredictable with its sonar usage, but again, depth charges are free to use, and you may be able to hit some, which is enough to make a submarine life harder. Currently, the only tools to detect submarines on periscope depth or lower would be radiolocation skill, planes, and hydroacoustic search. Radiolocation works as usual, but when the submarine goes deeper than periscope depth, it stops working and assumes nothing was there. For planes, they can spot submarines within their air detection range, both on the surface and at periscope depth, but it cannot spot underwater submarines. This applies to carrier and hybrid ship squadrons, ship-launched spotter, and ship-launched fighter planes. Planes will be your best shot at spotting sneaky submarines if your ship can't be equipped with hydro or radiolocation, such as battleships. However, planes can be spotted by submarines despite them being fully underwater, even down to maximum depth, so submarines will always know where they are. Yet another preferential treatment for submarines when it comes to spotting. And finally, for hydroacoustic, it can spot submarines on periscope depth within its action range, but if the submarine submerges, it can only detect said submarine if it's within 2 kilometers of the ship. While all of these tools can't spot submarine for prolonged amount of time, it forces the submarine to stay underwater, which means it cannot spot for the team, has limited maneuverability, and has to consider its approach against all of these countermeasures. In a sense, it made them more predictable, and in my opinion, simply having updates of the submarine whereabouts is comforting enough, even for a brief moment. That being said, competent submarine players will do their best to avoid being spotted. Planes can be seen from distance and can be avoided by submerging. Hydrophones gives updates on surface ships in the vicinity, and Watchful can notify the submarine of potential spotting consumables. So remember, you can't win against good submarines when it comes to spotting, but you can keep your distance and do a lot more for the team than a submerged submarine. Are you tagged by sonar ping and your DCP is on cooldown? Do not worry, here is what you can do. First is to get moving. Retreating will be preferred, but going forward would be possible as well. While doing this, play with the rudder and move in a zigzag pattern. This will mess up homing torpedoes' trajectory, so when they are close to your ship, they will be more likely to arrive from a dodgeable angle. The key is to always change your heading, and by changing heading I mean doing a full rudder or dropping speed. If you were sailing in one direction for way too long, be it sailing straight or turning, the torpedoes will keep adjusting to that course, and may have already been on intercept trajectory after it reached the cut-off distance. Again, I must emphasize, you must proactively maneuver the ship, and do not wait until the torpedoes are spotted. This would benefit battleships as they have the biggest homing torpedo cut-off distance, while cruisers and destroyers may still have to do last-minute dodging. Sonar ping does not care if your cruiser is a destroyer with a citadel or a submarine. The one with better maneuverability will have easier time dodging homing torpedoes and probably won't be focused. As for destroyers, the real dodging comes when the torpedoes are already spotted. First you turn into the torpedoes so they home into the new heading. Then once they are close enough, you turn the rudder to the other direction. This would be harder for double ping, so if you're a destroyer, make sure to save your DCP for that double ping. The pinged section in relation to torpedo direction also plays a part at dodging. For example, if your bow section is pinged and torpedoes are coming from your front starboard side, you can turn to starboard to dodge all of them. But if your stern section is pinged instead, you probably won't be able to dodge because the torpedoes were going for the middle of your hull. So here's a quick guide. If the sonar comes from the back, make sure it hits your stern while you retreat. If the sonar comes from the front, make sure it hits your bow while you push. If the sonar comes from your broadside, turn into whatever direction that are more tactically beneficial, preferably turning away, and don't forget to move in a zigzag pattern. Another way to dodge homing torpedoes is by getting behind island. If your ship has improved acceleration, you can slam on the brake to avoid torpedoes coming from your broadside. And of course you can use DCP to clear the ping, but this should be the last resort when you no longer have the time to maneuver, and best used immediately when the torpedoes are spotted. Don't hesitate when doing this, or you'll end up like this guy. Whatever you do, please do not be stationary, do not sail in a straight line, and most importantly do not be in an unfavorable position. Because here's the thing, the success rate of dodging homing torpedoes are still heavily dependent on other factors in the game. You might be angling against a focus fire, you might have a big island beside you. Anything that limits your ability to maneuver, a good submarine will take advantage of that. Or worse, employ the tactics shown in using homing torpedoes segment and make them even harder to dodge. Ultimately, there is no 100% guaranteed method to avoid homing torpedoes. If you want to avoid them completely, go uninstall the game, but you can learn to avoid most of them. Besides, homing torpedoes and submarines is just another layer of things that can ruin your day in World of Warships, and believe me, they are not the worst. How does one deal with shotguns? Well, not much you can do. Shotgunning can reliably guarantee damage or EXP when homing torpedoes no longer cuts it. But remember what I said in the shotgunning segment. A submarine is more likely to be doing this when opportunity presents itself, such as when a destroyer camps inside a smoke, when a battleship is left alone, or when it had nothing else to lose. That last one tends to happen when the team is losing. The easiest way to be suspicious on possible shotgun is when you are spotted in an unlikely place when playing cruisers or battleships, and then stopped being spotted. This means the submarine just went underwater to avoid spotting, but the sign was there. You can help notify the team and start being defensive. Although this wouldn't help much if the submarine already have a target. If the submarine wants you dead, you probably will. As for the shotguns themselves, your best chance against them is to point your bow towards the torpedoes, hoping to dodge some of them, and being saved by damage saturation. But really, unless the submarine absolutely blow their shot, you're playing into their hands no matter what. So this is bear repeating. Don't make yourself an easy target, and start to pay more attention to suspicious behaviors. Look at the bright side, at least being shotgunned won't let you suffer through multiple sonar pings. To wrap up, here are some examples of submarines that needs attention, and those that will be a pushover. A good submarine player will generally able to predict the outcome of the battle and adjust their playstyle accordingly, simply because submarines allows them to gather intelligence in a predictable way, and often without the enemy team knowing about it. They are the kind of players that seemingly did nothing but manages to top the scoreboard. In contrast to the bad ones, these players will have noticeably erratic behaviors such as spamming sonar and torpedoes, hoping they eventually found their marks. They will do it for the entire game, until it gets spotted for a brief moment, and then die to depth charge spam because it overextends. They are the ones that give submarines a bad reputation, yet were partly the reason why submarines doesn't receive much change. If you reached this point and watched the whole video, congratulations, you have longer attention span than the average doom scroller. But if you simply skip to the segments you wanted, I won't blame you either. A video of this length is not for everyone, but the goal is to be a one-stop guide for submarines, and allowing you to see the submarine's perspective without having to play them. I hope everything I made are clear, understandable, pleasant to watch, and helped you learn new things today. So, what would be my thoughts and suggestions on submarines? Well, currently, their gameplay design is on point. but their tools are still too powerful, and I'm not talking about homing torpedoes. I'm talking about hydrophones and that watchful skill. These two are very powerful intelligence gathering skill that were a 100% one-sided interaction. Hydrophones is practically surface radar that doesn't show the actual ship and doesn't tell them that they are being detected, while watchful prevents you from running into problems. Imagine a skill that warns you that you will be detected in a few kilometers by a spotting consumable. I simply think these tools are not fair. My suggestions would be to give warnings to spotted ships that they are being detected by hydrophone. Something like highlighted warning. The same applies to watchful. Enemy ships that uses their spotting consumables should have an indicator that there are a submarine within the vicinity. Although this is probably taking it a bit too far, and I would rather have the skill completely changed. Maybe rework the skill so it provides a detection delay to those spotting consumables when the submarine is within range, and remove the warning that a spotting consumable is currently active. Another thing to change is perhaps increasing normal torpedo arming distance so it wouldn't be the shotgunning torpedoes of choice, and people have to use them from range. Maybe a slight increase in damage would be fine as well, while keeping homing torpedoes as it were. Oh, and do something with underwater submarines being able to spot planes, and maybe tone down that crazy EXP earnings. And that's pretty much what I would change for submarines. I don't think they are such a big problem when playing the game. Normally they are nuisance. At worst they ruin one game, and at best they are free food. I mean, this game has enough problems already, but if submarines were really that big of a problem, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Anyway, this one-off video is nearing 1 hour, so I will end it here. Best of luck against submarines, and always stay lucky.